The black Ford was there again. Fourth time this week. I paused at the corner of my street, briefcase heavy in my hand after 12 hours at the law firm. There it sat, gleaming under the streetlight like an unwelcome sentinel, parked 2 houses down from ours. Not directly in front of my neighbor Ben Taylor's place, but close enough. As I watched, Ben himself emerged from his front door and, instead of staying on his own property, casually strolled across the dividing hedge onto our lawn. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd done this many times before. My stomach tightened as he approached our porch, where my wife Lydia sat with a glass of wine, her laughter carrying through the evening air. I remained frozen at the corner, partially hidden by Mrs. Henderson's oak tree. The familiarity between them was unsettling, the way Lydia tilted her head back when she laughed, the casual touch of Ben's hand on her shoulder. They hadn't noticed me yet. "He works too much," I heard Lydia say, the words carried on the breeze. "He wouldn't even notice if the rest was lost as a car passed behind me." I cleared my throat and stepped into view. Their reaction was subtle but telling, the imperceptible straightening of Lydia's posture, the fractional step back Ben took. "Jacob." Lydia's voice was pitched higher than normal, her smile too bright. "You're home early." It was 7:30 in the evening. I was in fact 2 hours late. "Ben was just checking if we still had his pruning shears," she added quickly. Ben nodded, hands shoved in his pockets. "Yeah, borrowed them last week. No rush though." His easy confidence grated on my nerves. "Remember that one time we split that bottle of Cabernet when Jacob was in Seattle?" Ben asked Lydia with a wink. "We should do that again sometime. The 3 of us, I mean." I didn't remember any arrangement where my wife and neighbor would be drinking wine alone together while I was away. The memory of my own brief indiscretion with Sarah from the office last year flashed through my mind, how I'd ended it immediately, consumed by guilt. Was this karma? "Sure thing," I managed, climbing the steps to join them. "Let me just get changed." Inside, our house told its own story. Lydia's phone lay face down on the coffee table. Her laptop was warm to the touch when I passed it. The couch cushions were misaligned, and upstairs our bed was hastily made, the duvet uneven, a pillow bearing an indentation that didn't match Lydia's petite frame. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face, trying to clear my head. Was I being paranoid? Projecting my own past guilt? When I opened Lydia's jewelry drawer looking for my cufflinks, I found a pair that weren't mine, silver with blue stone inlays. I'd never seen them before, but they appeared to be men's. I carefully photographed them before replacing them exactly as I'd found them. Downstairs, Lydia was alone, humming in the kitchen. Ben had vanished. "Where's our neighbor?" I asked, aiming for casual. "He remembered he had somewhere to be," she replied without turning around. The wine bottle on the counter was nearly empty. I noticed 2 glasses in the sink. "What was that about wine in Seattle?" I asked, reaching for the refrigerator. Lydia's hands paused momentarily as she chopped vegetables. "Oh, that was nothing. He stopped by with some gardening question when you were at that conference 3 months ago." I offered him a glass of wine. "It was barely anything." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The Seattle conference had been 5 months ago, not 3. That night, after Lydia fell asleep, I added notes to a password-protected file on my phone. "Black Ford 4th time this week. Ben walks onto our property like he owns it. That one time drinking wine when I was away. Phone face down, laptop warm. Bed hastily made. Unknown men's cufflinks. Timeline discrepancy about Seattle trip." As I closed the file, our phone bill notification popped up. I opened it, scrolling through the call log. Lydia had been texting an unknown number dozens of times daily, sometimes late into the night. The timestamps matched periods when she claimed to be grocery shopping or at her book club. I set my phone down and stared into the darkness of our bedroom. The woman breathing softly beside me suddenly felt like a stranger, one who might be betraying me in the same way I once almost betrayed her. Tomorrow, I decided, the real investigation would begin. 3 weeks slid by like a slow-motion car crash. I watched, cataloged, and said nothing. Lydia had changed. The shifts were subtle. A new perfume I didn't recognize, longer hours spent gardening, despite our plants looking no better than before, new clothing appearing in her closet without shopping bags ever crossing our threshold. She regularly disappeared for hours, offering thinly veiled excuses about errands that should have taken a fraction of the time. I maintained a facade of normalcy while quietly gathering evidence. Today, as rain tapped against the windows of my home office, I logged into our joint bank account, something I hadn't scrutinized in months. "What the hell?" I muttered, staring at a series of transactions labeled Regent Hotel. 4 charges over the past 2 months, each for one-night stays. We had never visited the region together. I loosened my tie, feeling the pressure building behind my eyes. The timestamps aligned perfectly with days Lydia had claimed to be visiting her sister in Tacoma. My phone pinged with a text from her. Meeting Jen for coffee. Back by 6. I checked my watch. This gave me 3 hours. 20 minutes later, I walked into the lobby of the Regent Hotel, dressed in my best suit and projecting the confidence of a man who belonged there. The young woman at the reception desk smiled as I approached. "Good afternoon, I'm here for a business meeting with a client who's staying at your hotel," I said smoothly. "But I seem to have misplaced their room number. Could you check under Monroe?" "I'm sorry, sir, but we can't provide room information without." "Of course I understand," I interjected with a practiced smile. "My wife Lydia might have made the booking." "Lydia Monroe?" Her fingers tapped across the keyboard. "Ah yes. Mrs. Monroe has stayed with us several times. Most recently last Thursday. But she checked out already." My heart slammed against my ribs. "Last Thursday. Right. That's when my client was here. What time did she check out?" The receptionist glanced around nervously. "I'm not really supposed to." "Please," I said, sliding a $50 bill across the counter. "It's important." She hesitated, then took the money. Check-in was at 1 p.m., check-out at 11 the next morning. Last Thursday, Lydia had told me she was at a day-long garden club exhibition. "Thank you," I said, turning away before my expression could betray me. "You've been very helpful." That evening, after Lydia returned, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine, I made a decision. If she was betraying me, I needed irrefutable evidence. The next day, I visited an electronics store in a part of town where nobody would recognize me. I purchased a small security camera, easily disguised as a decorative item, and installed it on our bookshelf with a view of the living room. The feed connected directly to an app on my phone. While searching for a good hiding spot for the receiver, I discovered a treasure trove in the back of our hall closet. A box of old electronics. Among them was a smartphone we'd both forgotten about, still functional and containing a surveillance app I'd installed years ago when we thought someone was breaking into our garage. I activated the app and placed the phone in an inconspicuous corner of our bedroom. Now I had eyes in 2 key locations. 2 days later, opportunity knocked. Lydia announced she was going grocery shopping, then meeting her book club. "I'll be about 4 hours, she said, kissing my cheek. "Don't wait up if you're tired." I nodded, focused on my laptop as if absorbed in work. The moment her car disappeared down the street, I opened the GPS tracking app linked to her phone, another layer of my investigation. Her car moved steadily through town, but instead of heading toward the grocery store, it traveled in the opposite direction. 20 minutes later, it stopped, at Ben's apartment complex. My hands trembled as I pulled up the archived footage from 3 months ago, when I'd been in Seattle for a conference. I fast-forwarded through hours of empty rooms until movement caught my eye. Lydia entered our living room, followed by Ben. They carried wine glasses, laughing intimately. I watched, throat constricting, as they settled on our couch, my place, bodies angled toward each other. Ben reached out, brushing hair from her face before leaning in. Their kiss deepened quickly, hands grasping at clothes. I stopped the video, feeling physically ill. Then, methodically, I saved a copy to a secure cloud storage. Later that night, I needed more evidence. While Lydia showered, I checked our shared tablet. She'd forgotten to log out of her email account. There it was, dozens of messages between her and Ben dating back over a year. Explicit photos. Plans for their rendezvous. Complaints about me. Mockery of my obliviousness. I forwarded the most damning emails to myself, then carefully returned everything to its original state. As I lay awake that night, Lydia sleeping peacefully beside me, I realized my investigation had only scratched the surface. The timing of their affair didn't add up. Ben had moved into the neighborhood just 18 months ago, but some messages hinted at a much longer connection. How deep did this betrayal go? And why did one message mention the plan for Jacob, and after it's done? Tomorrow I would dig into their past, and potentially uncover something far more sinister than an affair. The deeper I dug, the darker the hole became. Armed with the username and password I'd recovered from Lydia's tablet, I logged into her cloud storage from my office computer. I wasn't proud of this invasion, but self-preservation had overtaken moral qualms days ago. I copied everything incriminating, photos, messages, location data, to a secure drive and placed it in my office safe, alongside copies of the hotel receipts and surveillance footage. One folder caught my attention: college memories. I clicked it open, expecting more evidence of their affair. Instead, I found myself staring at photos from 15 years ago. Pictures of a younger Lydia with her arm wrapped around a younger, slimmer Ben at what appeared to be a graduation ceremony. My stomach dropped. They hadn't met when Ben moved into the neighborhood 18 months ago. They'd known each other long before Lydia ever met me. "You lied about everything," I whispered to the empty office, studying their smiling faces. In one photo they were locked in an embrace, her head tilted back in laughter, the exact same pose I'd witnessed on our porch weeks ago. That weekend we attended a neighborhood barbecue. I watched Lydia and Ben carefully from behind my sunglasses. They maintained their distance, but their eyes found each other across the crowded yard with practiced subtlety, a language of glances I was only now learning to decipher. Martha Jenkins, an older neighbor who'd lived in the area for decades, approached me as I stood alone by the drinks table. "Your Lydia looks lovely today," she said, following my gaze. I remember when she and Ben were inseparable before Susan came along. Such a tragedy. What happened? I nearly choked on my beer. "I'm sorry, you knew Lydia and Ben from before?" Martha's eyes widened. "Oh dear, I assumed you knew. They grew up in the same town. They dated through high school and college, from what Susan told me before she passed." Susan. Ben's deceased wife. The one who had died in what everyone called a tragic accident 2 years ago. Lydia mentioned they'd just met when Ben moved in, I said carefully. Martha looked confused. "Well, that's strange. I distinctly remember seeing them together at the memorial service. Lydia was quite broken up about it, though they were trying to be discreet. This was before you and Lydia met, of course." I excused myself, mind racing. Lydia and I had been married for just over a year, but we dated for 8 months before that. If Susan had died 2 years ago, and Lydia had attended the funeral, the timeline collapsed around me like a house of cards. Later, I positioned myself near the hedge separating our properties, pretending to adjust the sprinkler system while straining to hear Lydia and Ben, who had finally gravitated toward each other in a secluded corner of the yard. "He's starting to suspect something," Lydia whispered urgently. "We need to be more careful." "How much does he know?" Ben's voice was low, tense. "I don't think he's connected the dots about Susan yet. But he's been asking questions, looking into things." Their voices faded as they moved away, leaving me cold despite the summer heat. The next morning I called in sick and visited Jerome Wilkins, a divorce attorney from a competing firm whom I'd faced in court several times. "I need advice off the record," I told him, sliding a folder across his desk. "My wife is having an affair. I have evidence. But I think there's more to it, something potentially criminal." Jerome reviewed the materials, his expression growing grave. "Jacob, this isn't just about adultery. These messages suggest premeditation of something. I'd advise securing more evidence and possibly consulting law enforcement." That afternoon, I hired Malcolm Reed, a private investigator recommended by Jerome. I paid him in cash. "Follow my wife. Document who she meets, where she goes. I'm particularly interested in her interactions with this man," I said, showing him Ben's photo. "And I need information about his late wife, Susan Taylor. The circumstances of her death." 3 days later Malcolm called. "Your wife visits the man's apartment regularly, usually for 2 to 3 hours. They're careful, arrive separately, leave separately. But there's something else." I looked into the wife's death. Officially ruled accidental overdose of prescription medication. But I spoke to a former colleague in the department who worked the case. He said there were inconsistencies they couldn't resolve. "What kind of inconsistencies?" I asked, my throat dry. The amounts didn't add up. Susan had more medication in her system than should have been possible from her prescription. And there was a gap in the timeline, approximately 40 minutes when Ben claimed to be at the store but couldn't be accounted for. I thanked him and hung up, the pieces starting to form a horrifying picture. That night I lay awake watching Lydia's chest rise and fall as she slept. Who had I married? The cheater was one thing. But an accomplice to something far more sinister? I thought about the college photos, Martha's revelations, and the suspicious messages. My lawyer's mind constructed a timeline that chilled me to the bone. Whatever I'd stumbled upon, I was now certain of one thing. This wasn't just about an affair. And I might be in danger. I pushed open the front door, exhausted after another day of pretending nothing was wrong at the office. The house was unusually quiet, but a warm glow emanated from the dining room. I loosened my tie, senses immediately on high alert. "Lydia?" I called out, setting down my briefcase. "In here," she replied, her voice carrying a note of excitement I hadn't heard in months. I rounded the corner and stopped. Our dining room had been transformed, Candles flickered across the table, casting dancing shadows on the walls. 2 wine glasses stood beside an expensive bottle of Cabernet. The good china was set out and soft music played from hidden speakers. Lydia emerged from the kitchen wearing a dress I'd never seen before, her hair styled elegantly. For a moment, I almost forgot everything I'd discovered. She looked like the woman I'd fallen in love with. "What's all this?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. She approached me, eyes gleaming. "I have something to tell you." She took my hands in hers. "We're pregnant, Jacob. With twins." The world tilted beneath me. My mind raced through a quick calculation. Lydia and I had been intimate only twice in the past 3 months, both times perfunctory and distant. Meanwhile, her visits to Ben's apartment had been frequent. I forced a smile. "That's incredible news." I disengaged my hands from hers. "How far along?" 10 weeks, she replied, watching my reaction carefully. Another mental calculation. 10 weeks ago, I'd been home every night, working late on the Pritchard case. Unless, I thought maybe we should celebrate, Lydia continued, pouring wine into her glass. "Just a sip for me, of course." She laughed lightly. I sat down heavily in my chair. "Shouldn't we tell Ben first?" The wine glass froze halfway to her lips. Her face paled slightly before she recovered. "Why would we tell Ben? He's just a neighbor." "A neighbor who knows you take your coffee with 2 sugars and a dash of cinnamon," I said quietly. "A neighbor who knew about Susan's latex allergy." Her hand trembled slightly. "I don't know what you mean." "Susan had a severe latex allergy," I repeated. "You mentioned it weeks ago when we were discussing hospital protocols for the Johnston case. How would you know that intimate detail about a woman you supposedly never met?" Lydia set her glass down carefully. "Ben must have mentioned it at some point." "Funny thing about mentioning things," I said, reaching for my phone. "Our security camera has been mentioning quite a lot lately." Her eyes widened as I pulled up the surveillance footage on my phone and turned it toward her. On the screen, Lydia and Ben entered our living room, already kissing passionately. "Jacob, I can explain." "Save it," I cut her off. "You've known Ben since college. You didn't meet when he moved into the neighborhood. Martha Jenkins saw you at Susan's funeral. That was before you and I ever met." Each word felt like glass in my throat. "You've been lying from the beginning." Tears welled in her eyes. "It wasn't like that. Ben and I dated in college, yes. But we broke up years ago. When he moved here with Susan, it was purely coincidental." "Stop lying." I slammed my hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "I found your photos together from 15 years ago. I know you maintain contact. What I don't know is what happened to Susan." Lydia's expression hardened. Susan was troubled. She had issues with medication. What happened to her was tragic but not surprising to anyone who knew her. "And the twins?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "Are they even mine?" Her silence was answer enough. I stood up, pushing back from the table. "We're going to have a court-supervised DNA test. And I'm having Susan's case reopened." Lydia's face drained of all color. "You can't do that. The case is closed." "Watch me," I replied. "I've already spoken with Detective Ramirez. He found the inconsistencies in Susan's toxicology report very interesting." She lunged for my phone, but I anticipated the move, stepping back. "It's too late," I told her. "Everything's backed up. The surveillance footage, your emails to Ben, the hotel receipts. I have copies of it all in multiple locations." "You had no right to invade my privacy," she hissed. "And you had no right to make a mockery of our marriage," I countered. "Was I just a pawn in whatever game you and Ben are playing? Did you marry me for my money, my connections? Or was there something more sinister planned for me?" Her eyes darted toward the kitchen, toward her purse on the counter, before settling back on me. In that moment, I knew. "Don't even think about it," I warned. "I'm sleeping at a hotel tonight. Tomorrow, I'm filing for divorce." As I packed a bag, Lydia stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. "Jacob, please. The babies. If they're mine, I'll support them," I said flatly. "But I think we both know they're not." I brushed past her, bag in hand. At the door, I turned back. "One more thing. I've noticed my coffee has tasted strange lately. Almost metallic. I've been dumping it out for weeks now. Whatever you and Ben planned for me, it stops now." Her shocked expression was the last thing I saw as I closed the door behind me. Rain pelted against the window of my hotel room as I stared at the ceiling, sleep eluding me despite my exhaustion. By 6 in the morning, I'd given up and was already dressed, nursing my 3rd cup of coffee at a diner 3 blocks from the precinct. I'd called in a favor from Alex Mercer, a detective I'd helped clear of misconduct charges 2 years ago. He owed me. This is highly irregular, Alex muttered, sliding a manila folder across the scratched Formica table. If anyone asks, you never saw this. I nodded my thanks, opening the folder to reveal Susan Taylor's case file. The autopsy report confirmed what Malcolm had told me. The toxicology results showed levels of triazolam that far exceeded her prescription dosage. The me initially flagged it, Alex explained, keeping his voice low. But the investigating officer, Peters, was friends with your neighbor. Ruled it accidental overdose, case closed. Friends? I repeated, a cold feeling settling in my stomach. College buddies. Peters retired to Florida 6 months after the investigation. I flipped through witness statements, noting inconsistencies in Ben's account of that night. More troubling was a statement from a pharmacist who mentioned Susan had become increasingly anxious about her medication in the weeks before her death, claiming her pills looked different. There's one more thing, Alex said, sliding another paper toward me. I did some digging on your wife. Before she married you, she worked at Pharmatech for 3 years. The pharmaceutical company? I frowned. The same one that manufactured Susan's medication, Alex confirmed. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. I thanked Alex and left, my mind racing with the implications. Lydia hadn't just known Ben before, she'd worked at the company that made the very medication that killed his wife. I spent the afternoon poring over the case documents at the law library, building a timeline that made my blood run cold. By evening, I was ready to confront Lydia one last time. She was in the kitchen when I entered our house, startled by my appearance. Jacob, she breathed, clutching a glass of water. I didn't expect you back. Just getting some things, I replied, setting my briefcase on the counter. Interesting that you never mentioned your time at Pharmatech. Her hand tightened around the glass. It was just a job. Not worth mentioning. The same company that made Susan's medication, I pressed. Quite a coincidence. Lydia's phone buzzed on the counter. I glimpsed Ben's name before she snatched it away, but not before I saw the message. Did you get rid of everything? My lawyer has contacted the court about the paternity test, I said, watching her face. And I've already spoken with Detective Ramirez about reopening Susan's case. You can't do that, she repeated, panic edging her voice. I already have, I countered. I've also informed them about your employment at Pharmatech and your relationship with Ben that predated Susan's death. Her facade cracked. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand perfectly, I said, my voice deadly calm. You and Ben planned Susan's death. You helped him tamper with her medication. And then you planned to do the same to me. That's absurd, she whispered, but her eyes told a different story. Is it? The metallic taste in my coffee? The sudden concern about my health, suggesting I take sleeping pills? The strange text between you and Ben about the plan, and after it's done? I pulled out my phone, showing her I'd recorded our conversation. This, plus everything else I've gathered, is going to the police. Lydia lunged for me, her face contorted with rage, but I stepped aside. It's over, Lydia. I've blocked your access to our accounts. My lawyer has frozen our assets pending investigation. She let out a bitter laugh. You think you're so clever, Jacob. You have no idea what we're capable of. I walked to the hall closet and reached behind the stack of winter blankets, pulling out a shoebox. Inside were bundles of cash and 2 passports, one for Lydia and one for Ben, both under different names. Planning a trip? I asked, watching her face pale. The police will find this very interesting. My phone rang. Michael Taylor, Ben's older brother whom I'd met only once at a neighborhood gathering. Jacob, Michael's voice was tight. We need to talk about my brother and your wife. I've suspected for years that Ben had something to do with Susan's death. I agreed to meet him, hanging up just as Lydia began frantically texting, undoubtedly warning Ben. I've blocked your number from my phone, I told her, heading for the door. Any messages you send me are being forwarded directly to my lawyer. Same goes for Ben. It's out of your hands now. As I walked out, Lydia called after me, her voice cracking. You'll regret this, Jacob. You have no idea what you've started. I didn't look back. The truth was finally unraveling, and there was no stopping it now. Whatever sick game they'd been playing, whatever they'd planned for me, it was all coming to light. And I was determined to see justice done, not just for myself but for Susan as well. The Madison Hotel became my sanctuary, anonymous, secure, with no connection to either my professional or personal life. I changed all my passwords, emptied our joint accounts into separate ones only I could access, and instructed my office to deny all visitors. My phone remained off except for brief check-ins with my lawyer and Detective Ramirez. 3 days into my self-imposed exile, the front desk called to inform me of a letter that had been hand-delivered. No return address, no name. Just an envelope with Jacob Monroe written in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. I opened it cautiously, half expecting something sinister. Instead, I found a single page of hospital stationery dated 2 years prior. Mr. Monroe. You don't know me, but I know about your wife and Ben Taylor. I was the night nurse on duty when Susan Taylor died. Things weren't as they appeared. Susan had been expressing concerns about her husband for weeks, but nobody listened. The night she died, your wife was there, though she later denied it. I saw her leaving Susan's room 20 minutes before the code blue was called. If you want to know more, meet me at Riverfront Park, East Bench, Thursday at 3. Ellen. I read the letter 3 times, my hands trembling. A witness placed Lydia at the scene of Susan's death, a fact she had repeatedly denied. I called Malcolm immediately and arranged for him to observe the meeting from a distance, just in case. Thursday afternoon found me sitting on the designated bench, scanning faces, hyper-aware of my surroundings. At precisely 3 o'clock, a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and careful eyes sat beside me. Mr. Monroe? She didn't look at me directly. Ellen. I confirmed. She nodded. I shouldn't be doing this. My job could be at risk. I appreciate the risk you're taking, I said quietly. Your letter mentioned Lydia was at the hospital when Susan died? Ellen's hands twisted in her lap. Yes. I was doing my rounds when I saw her slip out of Susan's room. I thought it was strange because visiting hours were over, but sometimes we make exceptions for family. I assumed she was a relative. Did you mention this to the police? I tried. The detective, Peters, seemed uninterested. Said it wasn't relevant. She frowned. Later, I overheard him talking with Mr. Taylor in the hallway. They seemed friendly, laughing. It didn't sit right, not when a woman had just died. What about Susan? You mentioned she had concerns? Ellen nodded, lowering her voice. She confided in me during her previous admission for an allergic reaction. Said her husband had been acting strangely, moving money around, taking calls in the middle of the night. She was afraid. I absorbed this information, adding it to my mental timeline. And the night she died? Anything unusual about her condition? The symptoms were wrong, Ellen said simply. I've seen triazolam overdoses before. They don't progress the way Susan's did. It was too fast, too severe. But when I mentioned it to the attending physician, he dismissed my concerns. I thanked Ellen, giving her my lawyer's card in case she remembered anything else. As she walked away, my phone buzzed with a text from Jerome. Court date set for DNA test. Monday 9 a.m. Judge Clark presiding. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation and anxiety. I met with Michael Taylor, who shared his own suspicions about his brother's involvement in Susan's death but had no concrete evidence. He described a pattern of suspicious behavior, Ben's abrupt career changes, unexpected financial windfalls, and his peculiar emotional detachment after Susan's passing. He didn't grieve, Michael said flatly. Not really. He went through the motions, but a month later he was vacationing in the Bahamas. Who does that after losing their wife? Monday morning arrived with a sense of foreboding. I stood outside the courthouse, steeling myself for the confrontation ahead. Jerome met me at the steps, briefcase in hand. Ready? He asked. I nodded, straightening my tie. Let's end this. Inside, the small courtroom was nearly empty. Judge Clark, a stern woman in her 60s, reviewed the paternity petition with practiced efficiency. The court-appointed technician prepared his equipment in the corner. The doors opened and Lydia entered with her attorney, a shark in an expensive suit. Ben followed close behind, his expression unreadable. They sat on the opposite side, steadfastly avoiding my gaze. Before we begin, Judge Clark announced, I want to make it clear that this proceeding is solely to establish paternity. Any other matters will need to be addressed in separate hearings. I nodded, while Lydia whispered urgently to her lawyer. Let's proceed then, the judge continued. Mrs. Monroe, Mr. Taylor, and Mr. Monroe will provide samples for DNA testing. Results will be sealed and delivered to this court within 5 business days. As the technician prepared to take our samples, the courtroom doors burst open again. A tall man with dark hair and intense eyes strode in, followed by 2 police officers. Your Honor, he announced, my name is Victor Reeves. I have evidence pertinent to this case and these proceedings. Lydia gasped, her face draining of color. Ben half rose from his seat, looking panicked. Who is this man? Judge Clark demanded. He's mentioned in several text messages between the defendants, one officer explained. We believe he has information relevant to the ongoing criminal investigation. Victor's eyes locked with mine, then flicked to Lydia. Hello, darling, he said coldly. Surprised to see me? Lydia swayed in her seat, then slumped forward, unconscious. As chaos erupted in the courtroom, my phone vibrated with an incoming call, a former colleague of Lydia's from Pharmatech responding to my inquiries. The text preview made my blood run cold. She was fired for stealing pharmaceutical samples, specifically triazolam. The courtroom chaos subsided as paramedics attended to Lydia. Judge Clark called a 30-minute recess, but ordered all parties to remain in the building. 2 officers stationed themselves at the doors. This had evolved beyond a simple paternity hearing. Victor Reeves approached me in the hallway, extending his hand. Jacob Monroe. We should talk. I studied him warily. Who exactly are you? Someone else they lied to, he replied, his expression grim. And possibly the father of those twins. We found an empty conference room where Victor revealed his story. He was a successful venture capitalist whom Lydia had met at a charity gala 8 months ago. She had introduced Ben as her brother, claiming he needed investment in a medical treatment for a rare condition. I fell for her, Victor admitted, running a hand through his hair. Hard and fast. We were together for months while she extracted over $200,000 from me for her brother's treatment. I had no idea she was married to you. How did you find out? I asked. Pure luck. I surprised her with a visit when she claimed to be at a medical conference. Found text messages between her and Ben discussing their plan for me. His jaw tightened. When I confronted her, she disappeared. Then I started digging. I shared what I'd discovered about Susan's death and Lydia's connection to Pharmatech. Victor wasn't surprised. I found old bank transfers from Lydia to Ben through a shell company, dating back to before Susan's death, he said, pulling out his phone to show me. And look at this, a large transfer from Ben to Lydia right after the insurance payout for Susan. We were piecing together a horrifying picture when Jerome entered, accompanied by Detective Ramirez. We've got a warrant to search their properties, Ramirez announced. The judge expedited it based on the new evidence from Mr. Reeves and your former colleague at Pharmatech. I'd like to be present, I said, standing. So would I, Victor added. Ramirez hesitated, then nodded. Stay back and don't touch anything. 2 hours later, we stood in Ben's apartment as officers methodically searched every drawer and cabinet. In a hidden compartment above his kitchen cabinets, they found a shoebox containing Susan's journal and letters expressing her growing fear of Ben. He's changing, one entry read. Sometimes I catch him watching me with this calculating look. The other day I found him researching my life insurance policy. When I confronted him, he said he was just making sure our finances were in order, but something feels wrong. The final entry, dated 3 days before her death, sent chills down my spine. Someone has been tampering with my medication. The pills look slightly different. When I mentioned it to Ben, he got angry, said I was imagining things. I've hidden some in my jewelry box to show Dr. Marshall tomorrow. I don't feel safe anymore. Ramirez bagged the journal as evidence. This changes everything, he said quietly. My phone rang, Ben's number. Against my better judgment, I answered and put it on speaker. Jacob, his voice was desperate. This is getting out of control. You need to stop. It's too late for that, Ben, I replied calmly. The police have Susan's journal. A sharp intake of breath. You don't understand. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. Susan was. Was what, Ben? I pressed. It was an accident, he insisted, but his voice wavered. The insurance money, we never expected it would be so much. We. Detective Ramirez interjected. Ben fell silent, realizing his mistake. I need to talk to Lydia, he finally said. She's being questioned at the station, Ramirez informed him. I suggest you come in voluntarily, Mr. Taylor. The line went dead. Back at the courthouse, the DNA samples were finally collected. Victor, Ben, and I each provided cheek swabs under the watchful eye of Judge Clark, who had been briefed on the developing criminal investigation. Results will be expedited, she announced. Given the circumstances, I'm ordering them within 48 hours. As we left the courthouse, reporters had already gathered. Someone had leaked the story. Cameras flashed as we descended the steps, reporters shouting questions about the dramatic courtroom scene and Lydia's collapse. That evening, I sat in Jerome's office reviewing the mounting evidence. Ramirez called with an update. They'd found prescription pads and sample medications in Lydia's car, hidden under the spare tire. Among them were several doses of triazolam with tampered packaging. "Ben's turned himself in," Ramirez added. "He's talking, trying to cut a deal. Claims Lydia was the mastermind behind everything." "And Lydia?" I asked, still maintaining innocence, but her story's falling apart. She didn't expect Victor to show up or for us to find Susan's journal. After hanging up, I turned to Jerome. "What happens now?" "Now we wait for the DNA results," he replied. "But Jacob, you should prepare yourself. This is going to get uglier before it's over." I nodded, feeling strangely hollow. My marriage, my trust, my sense of reality, all had been systematically destroyed by the woman I thought I knew. And somehow, I suspected we'd only scratched the surface of her deception. Outside the window, lightning split the sky, followed by a rumble of thunder. A perfect metaphor for the storm that had become my life. Morning arrived with a media frenzy outside the courthouse. What had begun as a private paternity hearing had exploded into the biggest scandal our city had seen in years. Reporters crowded the steps, cameras flashed, and microphones were thrust in my face as I made my way inside with Jerome at my side. "No comment," he repeated firmly, guiding me through the throng. Inside wasn't much better. The normally quiet hallways buzzed with spectators and legal personnel, all eager to witness what had become known as the Deadly Triangle case. Judge Clark had moved proceedings to a larger courtroom to accommodate the increased attention. I scanned the room, noting Victor seated in the front row. Our eyes met, and he gave a grim nod. Despite our unusual connection, I'd found an unexpected ally in this man who'd also been deceived by Lydia. The bailiff called for attention as Judge Clark entered. Her expression was stern as she surveyed the packed courtroom. "Before we proceed," she announced, "I want to make it clear that this court will not tolerate disruptions. This remains, first and foremost, a legal proceeding." I noticed with surprise that Lydia's parents weren't present. Instead, a woman who bore a striking resemblance to Lydia sat in the back row, her expression troubled. I remembered Lydia mentioning an estranged sister, Caitlin, though she'd never explained the estrangement. The doors opened again and Lydia entered in custody, looking pale but composed in a conservative navy dress. She avoided looking at me, her eyes fixed straight ahead. Ben followed separately with his own attorney, deliberately keeping his distance from Lydia. "Your Honor," Lydia's attorney began, "my client is 8 weeks pregnant with twins. We request consideration regarding her detention conditions." "Noted," Judge Clark replied coolly. "Now, I understand we have DNA test results?" The court-appointed technician approached, handing a sealed envelope to the judge. The courtroom fell silent as she broke the seal and reviewed the contents. Her expression revealed nothing as she looked up. "Mrs. Monroe," she said finally, "in light of these results, would you like to amend any of your previous statements to this court?" Lydia whispered urgently to her attorney, who shook his head firmly. "No, Your Honor," Lydia replied, her voice steady. "I maintain that Mr. Monroe is the father of my unborn children." Judge Clark's eyebrows rose slightly. "Very well." She gestured to the bailiff, who opened a side door. A woman in a lab coat entered, carrying a folder. I recognized Dr. Rachel Morgan, a respected geneticist from the University Hospital. "Dr. Morgan," Judge Clark said, "please explain your findings to the court." Dr. Morgan approached the witness stand. "Your Honor, I was asked to independently verify the DNA results from the samples provided by Mrs. Monroe, Mr. Taylor, and Mr. Reeves." She opened her folder. "I can confirm with 99.9% certainty that neither Mr. Monroe nor Mr. Taylor is the biological father of Mrs. Monroe's twins." A murmur swept through the courtroom. Lydia's composure cracked, her eyes darting frantically between her attorney and Ben. "The DNA profile of the fetuses," Dr. Morgan continued, "is consistent with Mr. Reeves being the biological father." Victor closed his eyes briefly, his suspicions confirmed. "Furthermore," Dr. Morgan added, "at the request of the district attorney, I examined Mrs. Monroe's medical records from her prenatal visit. There is evidence suggesting Mrs. Monroe was knowingly taking medication contraindicated during pregnancy, medication that has been linked to fetal abnormalities." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Lydia half rose from her seat, her face contorted with rage, but her attorney pulled her back down. The courtroom doors opened once more, and a tall woman in her 30s entered, approaching the bench with purposeful strides. "Your Honor," she said, "I'm Dr. Rachel Chen. I was Mrs. Monroe's attending physician during her prenatal visit. I have information relevant to these proceedings." Judge Clark nodded for her to continue. Mrs. Monroe was explicitly informed about the risks of continuing certain medications during pregnancy, Dr. Chin stated. She assured me she had discontinued all such medications. However, blood tests revealed active compounds in her system at levels suggesting deliberate consumption, not accidental exposure. Lydia's attorney stood. Objection. This goes beyond the scope of a paternity hearing. Sustained, Judge Clark replied. However, Dr. Chen's testimony will be noted and provided to the district attorney for the related criminal case. Ben suddenly stood, pointing at Lydia. She knew exactly what she was doing. She's trying to manipulate all of us. Mr. Taylor, control yourself, Judge Clark warned. But Ben was beyond restraint. She did the same thing to Susan. It was her idea to substitute the medication. She knew exactly how to make it look like an accident. Lydia lunged to her feet. Shut up, Ben. You wanted Susan's money? You said it yourself. Once she's gone, we'll be set for life. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Officers moved toward Ben, who backed away, panic in his eyes. It was her idea, he shouted. She knew how to get the drugs. She worked at Pharmatech. You gave her the pills, Ben? Lydia screamed back. It was your idea to give her those tablets. You wanted her money. Judge Clark pounded her gavel. Order. I will have order in this court. But it was too late. In their desperation to blame each other, Ben and Lydia had confessed to Susan's murder in front of a packed courtroom. And I sat there, watching as my life with Lydia crumbled into dust, replaced by the horrifying truth of who she really was. The courtroom had barely settled when the side doors burst open. Detective Ramirez entered with 2 officers, arrest warrants in hand. Judge Clark, recognizing the gravity of the situation, called a 15-minute recess to allow the officers to take Ben and Lydia into custody. Benjamin Taylor and Lydia Monroe, Ramirez announced, his voice cutting through the murmurs, you are both under arrest for the murder of Susan Taylor, conspiracy to commit fraud, and attempted murder of Jacob Monroe. The words attempted murder sent another shock wave through the spectators. I felt strangely detached, as if watching the scene from above. Lydia's face contorted with fury as an officer handcuffed her. This is ridiculous, she protested. Jacob, tell them. Tell them I would never hurt you. I met her eyes, seeing the stranger behind them. They found the poison in my coffee grounds, Lydia. And in the food you prepared for me. Low doses building up over time. Just like with Susan. Her expression shifted, calculation replacing outrage. It was all Ben, she insisted, her voice breaking with manufactured emotion. He forced me to do it. I was afraid of him. Ben laughed bitterly as he was cuffed. That's rich coming from you. Lydia was the mastermind behind everything, he told Ramirez. We met in college, reconnected years later. She had this whole scheme figured out, find wealthy targets, charm them, then eliminate them for the inheritance or insurance. Mr. Taylor, his attorney warned, I advise you to remain silent. But Ben was beyond legal advice. Susan was just the first. She had a substantial life insurance policy through her family's business. I was the sole beneficiary. He looked at me with something like pity. You were supposed to be next, Monroe. The prenup would have been invalidated if you died during the marriage. Lydia knew exactly how your will was structured. Officers led them toward different exits, but Lydia twisted around to face me one last time. You were too smart for your own good, Jacob, she called out. Always asking questions, always suspicious. If you'd just taken your coffee like a good husband, this would all be over by now. The doors closed behind them, leaving a stunned silence. When court resumed, Detective Ramirez took the stand to present the evidence they'd accumulated. The picture he painted was more disturbing than even I had imagined. Our search of Ms. Monroe's personal effects revealed a detailed log of her targets, he explained, displaying a leather-bound notebook on the evidence screen. Mr. Taylor and Ms. Monroe have been operating this scheme for years, beginning with Susan Taylor's death 2 years ago. He displayed financial records showing how Susan's life insurance payout of $1.5 million had been divided between Ben and Lydia through a series of offshore transfers. Ms. Monroe would identify potential targets, usually wealthy men with substantial assets. Mr. Taylor would follow with background research, identifying vulnerabilities and establishing their approach. Victor stood up. I was one of those targets, wasn't I? Ramirez nodded grimly. According to their notes, you were selected because of your recent divorce and apparent desire for a family. Ms. Monroe was instructed to accelerate attachment through pregnancy, while Mr. Taylor posed as her brother to extract funds for a fictional medical treatment. And me? I asked, though I already knew the answer. You were chosen for your assets and the specific structure of your will, which left everything to your spouse in the event of your death. Ramirez's expression was sympathetic. They began administering small doses of a tasteless, odorless compound in your food and beverages approximately 4 months ago. Medical tests confirm its presence in your system, though thankfully at non-lethal levels. My mind flashed to all the mornings Lydia had insisted on bringing me coffee in bed, the dinner she'd suddenly taken to preparing after years of disinterest in cooking. The most damning evidence, Ramirez continued, came from their electronic communications. He displayed a series of text messages on the screen. Oh, how long until it takes effect? B weeks. Has to look natural. Increasing his dosage tomorrow. Oh good. Getting tired of playing devoted wife. B. After he's gone we move to phase 3 with Reeves. Victor's face paled. They were planning to kill me too? After extracting maximum financial support, Ramirez confirmed. Your appearance today likely saved your life, Mr. Reeves. Caitlin, Lydia's sister, approached the witness stand next. Her testimony painted a picture of Lydia that even I, with all I'd discovered, found shocking. She's always been manipulative, Caitlin explained, her voice steady despite the emotion behind her words. Even as children, she could twist situations to her advantage, make people believe whatever she wanted. Our parents cut contact when they discovered she'd been stealing from them for years. As the evidence mounted, I felt a strange sense of clarity replacing my shock. The woman I married had never existed. She was a carefully crafted persona designed to ensnare me. When the proceedings ended for the day, Judge Clark looked directly at me. Mr. Monroe, I'm deeply sorry for what you've endured. The court will expedite your divorce proceedings given these extraordinary circumstances. I nodded my thanks, gathering my things. As I prepared to leave, Detective Ramirez approached with an evidence bag. We found this in Lydia's personal safe, he said quietly, handing me a small vial. The antidote she kept on hand in case she accidentally ingested any of the poison herself. You should give it to your doctor, it might help with your recovery. I stared at the vial, the final piece of evidence that my wife had been methodically trying to kill me, and wondered how I'd ever trust anyone again. The trial of Ben Taylor and Lydia Monroe dominated headlines for months. What the press dubbed the Black Widow conspiracy became a national sensation, complete with true crime specials and podcasts dissecting every gruesome detail. I declined all interview requests, seeking solitude as the case unfolded. I sat in the back row of the courtroom most days, watching as prosecutors methodically laid out the evidence of their years-long scheme. Their college relationship had been the foundation for everything that followed. Not a romance but a partnership built on shared sociopathy and greed. The defendants met in a psychology class, the prosecutor explained to the riveted jury, where instead of learning to help people, they studied how to manipulate them. They perfected their approach over years, targeting wealthy, vulnerable individuals. Susan had been their first victim, chosen for her substantial life insurance policy and isolated lifestyle. According to recovered journal entries from Lydia's cloud storage, they had practiced their techniques on smaller targets before graduating to murder. After Susan's death, the prosecutor continued, they waited 14 months before initiating Phase 2, finding Mr. Monroe, a successful attorney with substantial assets and no immediate family. The medical evidence was damning. Toxicology reports confirmed I had ingested small doses of a rare compound derived from certain pharmaceutical precursors, exactly the type Lydia had access to from her time at Pharmatech. My doctor estimated that within another month, the compound would have reached lethal levels in my system. I saved all the coffee you made me, I testified during my turn on the stand. After I found the strange transfers to the Regent Hotel, I became suspicious and started dumping it out. The same with dinners, I'd eat at the office or dispose of food at home when you weren't looking. Lydia glared at me throughout my testimony, her eyes cold and calculating even as the evidence mounted against her. Ben, meanwhile, had turned state's witness, providing detailed accounts of their scheme in exchange for the possibility of parole in his lifetime. The twins became another source of contention. Born while Lydia awaited trial, they were immediately placed in temporary custody. Victor, confirmed as the biological father, petitioned for full parental rights, which were granted after extensive background checks and psychological evaluations. She never wanted children, Victor told me over coffee after one particularly grueling day in court. The pregnancy was just another manipulation tool, a way to extract financial support from me and to cement her position in your life. The twins, a boy and girl, would never know their mother. The courts terminated Lydia's parental rights based on her conviction for murder and her deliberate consumption of substances harmful to the fetuses. 3 months into the trial, the jury reached their verdict after just 6 hours of deliberation: guilty on all counts. Ben received 30 years to life for his role in Susan's murder and the conspiracy against me. Lydia, deemed the mastermind and more dangerous of the pair, received life without possibility of parole for multiple counts of murder, attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. I attended the sentencing, needing to witness the final chapter of this nightmare. As the bailiff led Lydia away, she looked back at me one last time. "This isn't over, Jacob," she said, her voice eerily calm. "I'll find a way out eventually." I didn't reply. Her threats had lost their power over me. A year after the trial concluded, I found myself standing at Susan's grave, placing flowers beside the headstone. I'd begun a foundation in her name to help victims of domestic fraud and abuse, funneling my energies into something positive. "She would have appreciated that," a gentle voice said behind me. I turned to find Susan's parents, whom I'd met during the trial. Mrs. Taylor embraced me warmly. "We wanted to thank you," Mr. Taylor said, his voice thick with emotion. "Without your persistence, we might never have known the truth about our daughter's death." "I wish I'd discovered it sooner," I replied honestly. "You couldn't have known," Mrs. Taylor assured me. "That's how people like them operate, in shadows behind masks of normalcy." We walked together through the cemetery, sharing memories of Susan and discussing the foundation's work. As we parted ways, my phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Rachel Chin, the physician whose testimony had been crucial in exposing Lydia's intentional harm to her unborn children. "Still on for dinner tonight?" the text read. I smiled as I typed my reply. Rachel and I had been dating for several months, taking things slowly. She understood my trust issues and never pushed for more than I could give. With her, I was learning that not all relationships were built on deception. As I pocketed my phone, another message appeared, from an unknown number. My heart froze as I opened it. "It's not over, Jacob. I'll get out of here eventually." I stared at the screen, then deliberately deleted the message. Lydia would remain in maximum security for life. Her threats were empty now, the desperate grasping of a woman who had lost everything. Justice had prevailed. And while the scars of betrayal would never fully heal, I had survived her deadly game. That in itself was victory enough.